I've never posted here before, but I need to get this off my chest. I feel like my world has been flipped upside down, and I don't even know who I am anymore. Let me start from the beginning. My wife, Anne, and I have been married for 25 years. She's a 50-year-old professor at a well-known university, incredibly intelligent, well-respected, and loved by her students. We have 3 wonderful children: Sarah, 22, in her final year of college; Michael, 19, just starting university; and little Emily, 14, still figuring out her place in the world. Our marriage wasn't perfect, whose is, but I thought we were happy. We built a beautiful life together, a nice house in the suburbs, family vacations, birthdays, and anniversaries. But looking back now, I wonder if I was just blind to everything. It all started when Sarah came home for the summer. She had always been close to Anne, so it wasn't unusual for them to spend hours talking. But one evening, Sarah pulled me aside, visibly shaken. "Dad, I overheard Mom on the phone," she whispered, her voice trembling. "She was talking to someone, intimately. I don't know who it was, but it didn't sound right." At first, I dismissed it. Maybe Anne was just being friendly or joking with a colleague. But Sarah's worried expression stuck with me. The thought that Anne might be hiding something made my stomach turn. We had always been honest with each other, or so I thought. That night, as Anne slept soundly beside me, I made a decision that would change everything. I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was wrong. So I waited until she left for work the next morning, then logged onto her laptop. She always kept it locked, but I'd seen her type her password dozens of times. When I opened her email, my heart stopped. There were messages, dozens of them. They were from her students. Young men barely out of their teens. The conversations were flirtatious, inappropriate, and some even hinted at meetings outside of class. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My wife, the woman I had trusted for over 2 decades, was cheating on me with students. I felt a surge of anger, betrayal, and disgust. But instead of confronting her immediately, I decided to dig deeper. I needed to know how far this had gone. What I found next shook me to my core. I spent hours going through her emails, messages, and even her calendar. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. And had been meeting these students outside of work, at cafes, hotels, and even at our summer cabin. The cabin! The place we had spent countless family weekends, where we'd celebrated birthdays and anniversaries. It was tainted now. One student in particular caught my attention. His name was Jake. He was 21, just a few years older than Sarah. Their conversations were disturbingly personal. He called her my muse and thanked her for changing his life. I found pictures, selfies of the 2 of them smiling, laughing, and even one where he was wearing my sweater. My sweater. I felt like I was going to be sick. My hands shook as I scrolled through the messages, piecing together the timeline. This wasn't a one-time thing. It had been going on for years. Years. While I was working late to provide for our family, she was out living some secret, twisted fantasy. But then, I found something that made my blood run cold. There was a folder on her laptop labeled Projects. It seemed innocent enough, but when I opened it, I found videos. They were recordings of her and these students. She had filmed them, without their knowledge, as far as I could tell. The realization hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just an affair. This was something far darker. Something criminal. I closed the laptop and sat there in silence, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to confront her right then and there. But I knew I couldn't. Not yet. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about protecting my children, my family. And maybe, it was about something more. I needed a plan. That evening, I acted like everything was normal. And came home, kissed me on the cheek, and asked how my day was. I could barely look at her. Every smile she gave me felt like a slap in the face. But I played along. I couldn't let her suspect anything. Over the next few days, I started gathering evidence. I copied the emails, the messages, the videos, everything. I even bought a hidden camera and set it up in her home office. I needed proof. Not just for myself, but for the authorities. If she was crossing lines with her students, she needed to face the consequences. But then, something unexpected happened. Jake showed up at our house. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was in the garage working on a project when I saw him pull into the driveway. He was bold enough to show up at my home. At first, I thought he might be one of Sarah's friends, but then Anne came rushing out of the house, looking panicked. She pulled him aside, and they started whispering furiously. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the look on her face told me everything I needed to know. She was scared. I stayed out of sight, watching as they argued. At one point, Jake raised his voice, saying something like, "You promised me," and shushed him and glanced around nervously, as if she thought someone might be watching. Little did she know I was. When he finally left, she went back inside, her face pale. She didn't say a word about it to me or the kids. That night, I reviewed the footage from the hidden camera. She had gone into her office and made a call. "We have a problem," she said. "Jake's getting reckless. He's threatening to go public." My heart raced. Public? What did that mean? And why did it feel like she was hiding more than I already knew? I had to act fast. And thought she had control of the situation, but she was wrong. This wasn't just about her betrayal anymore. This was about justice. And I was going to make sure she got what she deserved. The revelation about Jake, going public, only added fuel to the fire burning inside me. Anne's betrayal was one thing, but now there was a risk her actions could destroy our entire family's reputation. If this got out, Sarah, Michael, and Emily would have to face the fallout too. I couldn't let that happen. I needed a way to expose and without dragging our kids through the mud. But more importantly, I wanted her to feel the same devastation she had inflicted on me. My mind raced, formulating a plan, a cruel, calculated plan. If she thought she could manipulate people and keep her secrets hidden, I was going to show her what it felt like to lose control. I started by reaching out to Jake. It wasn't hard to find him. A quick search of Anne's emails gave me his contact information. I sent him a message pretending to be someone from the university administration. I claimed I was investigating inappropriate relationships between faculty and students and asked if he would be willing to talk. To my surprise, he agreed almost immediately. We met at a coffee shop a few days later. Jake was nervous, shifting in his seat and avoiding eye contact. He clearly hadn't expected to be caught in this kind of situation. "So," I began, keeping my tone calm, "tell me about your relationship with Professor Anne." Jake hesitated. Are you sure this is anonymous?" he asked. "Completely," I lied. "We just need to understand what happened." At first, he was reluctant, but eventually, the floodgates opened. He admitted everything. How Anne had approached him after class one day, how she'd invited him to her office, how things had escalated from there. He even confirmed that he had no idea she'd been recording their encounters. "She said she loved me," he mumbled, his voice breaking. "She promised me we'd have a future together." It took everything in me not to explode in anger. Instead, I kept pushing for details, all while secretly recording the conversation on my phone. By the time we finished, I had more than enough evidence to destroy Anne's carefully constructed facade. But I wasn't done yet. I needed more leverage, something that would ensure Anne couldn't wriggle her way out of this. So I reached out to another one of her students. This time, I used a different approach. I posed as a journalist working on an exposé about power imbalances in academia. The student, a shy, soft-spoken young man named Liam, was hesitant at first but eventually agreed to talk. What he revealed shocked me even more than Jake's confession. Liam claimed that Anne had pressured him into the relationship by threatening his grades. She told him that if he didn't comply, she'd make sure he failed her class, and possibly others. The power dynamic was undeniable. Anne wasn't just cheating, she was abusing her position in the worst possible way. I recorded every word of our conversation. By the time I left that meeting, I felt like I was carrying a ticking time bomb in my pocket. I had enough evidence to ruin Anne's career, her reputation, and possibly even land her in jail. But I still wasn't satisfied. I wanted her to feel the pain, the humiliation, the betrayal that I was feeling. And I knew exactly how to make it happen. With Jake and Liam's confessions, I had all the ammunition I needed. But I wasn't ready to pull the trigger just yet. I wanted to break Anne's carefully curated world piece by piece. I wanted her to see it coming and feel powerless to stop it. My first move was subtle. I anonymously sent an email to the university's ethics committee, attaching the evidence I'd gathered. I included excerpts from her emails, transcripts of the recorded conversations, and even screenshots of her calendar showing meetings with the students. I made sure to point out the abuse of power and the illegal nature of her actions. Then I waited. It didn't take long for the wheels to start turning. A week later, Anne came home looking unusually tense. She was quiet during dinner, picking at her food and avoiding eye contact with everyone. I pretended not to notice, keeping the conversation light and focused on the kids. The next day, I overheard her on the phone in her office. "They called me in for a meeting," she whispered. "Someone reported me. No, I don't know who. I can't talk about this over the phone." I smiled to myself. Phase 1 was complete. But I wasn't stopping there. I had one more ace up my sleeve, Anne's hidden videos. I'd been debating whether to release them, knowing how damaging they could be. But then I realized I didn't need to leak them myself. I just needed to create enough chaos for someone else to do it. I created an anonymous account and sent a message to Jake. Subject: "You deserve the truth." Message: "Anne has been recording you without your consent. You're not the only one. Check her laptop if you don't believe me." I included a link to a file-sharing service with a folder containing snippets of the videos. I blurred Anne's face to make it seem like someone else had leaked them. It was cruel, but I knew it would push him over the edge. A few days later, all hell broke loose. Anne came home in tears, clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. She barely said a word to me, rushing upstairs to her office. Moments later, I heard her sobbing. I waited a few minutes, then knocked on the door. "Anne? Is everything okay?" She tried to compose herself, wiping her face and forcing a smile. "Just a rough day at work." I nodded, pretending to believe her. "If you need to talk, I'm here." Her eyes flickered with guilt, but she said nothing. Later that evening, I checked her laptop and saw the fallout. Jake had sent her an angry email, accusing her of ruining his life. He threatened to expose everything if she didn't fix this, and had replied, begging him to stay quiet, but it was too late. The videos were already circulating online. The university acted quickly. Within days, Anne was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. The story started spreading through local news outlets, and whispers of her actions reached our community. Parents stopped waving to her on the street. Friends stopped calling. Anne was unraveling, and I watched it all with cold satisfaction. But I wasn't done yet. There was still one more card I had to play, a card that would shatter the last remnants of her life. Anne's world was crumbling, but I wasn't ready to stop. Every tear she shed, every sleepless night, felt like a fraction of what she had put me through. The humiliation, the betrayal, it was all catching up to her. Yet there was one more move I had been saving for the perfect moment. Our youngest daughter, Emily, was supposed to have a parent-teacher conference at school that week. Normally, Anne would attend these events, but with the scandal brewing, she had been too distracted to remember. So, I volunteered to go in her place. Emily's teachers were kind and understanding, praising her academic performance and sweet personality. It was a welcome break from the chaos at home. But as I was leaving, one of the teachers, Mrs. Tanner, hesitated. "Mr. Collins, can I speak with you privately for a moment?" I nodded, curious. Once we were alone, she closed the door and looked uncomfortable. "I don't know if this is my place, but some of the older students have been talking about a video involving your wife. It's been circulating online." I froze. My blood ran cold. Emily's school. The videos. It was worse than I'd imagined. Mrs. Tanner continued, I thought you should know in case it starts affecting Emily. She's such a bright girl, and I'd hate for this to impact her. I thanked her and left, my mind racing. I had never intended for Emily, or any of my children, to get caught in the crossfire. But now it was unavoidable. The scandal was spreading faster than I'd anticipated, and it was only a matter of time before the kids learned the full extent of Anne's actions. That night, I confronted Anne. I went to Emily's school today, I said casually over dinner. Her teacher mentioned something interesting. Anne looked up, her face pale. Oh? What did she say? I stared at her, my voice steady. She said some students are talking about a video. A video of you. Her fork clattered onto the plate. That's ridiculous, she stammered. Why would... Don't, I interrupted, my tone sharper now. Don't lie to me anymore, Anne. I know everything. The emails. The students. The recordings. I know it all. The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth to speak but couldn't find the words. For years, I continued, my voice rising, you've lied to me, to our children, to everyone. You've destroyed everything we built together. And now it's catching up to you. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. What do you want me to do? She whispered, her voice trembling. I want you to face the consequences, I said coldly. I want you to know what it feels like to lose everything. And with that, I left the table. I couldn't bear to look at her anymore. The next day, I filed for divorce. I made sure to request full custody of Emily, citing Anne's scandal as proof of her unfit behavior. I also contacted the university, sharing more evidence of her actions to ensure they couldn't sweep the investigation under the rug. And begged me to reconsider, but it was too late. Her career was over. Her reputation was in ruins. And soon she would lose her family too. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. And didn't take the divorce filing well. She spent days in bed, refusing to eat or talk to anyone. I thought this was just another phase in her downfall, but then something happened that I never saw coming. One evening, as I was working late in my study, I heard a loud knock on the front door. When I opened it, 2 police officers stood on my porch. Mr. Collins? One of them asked. Yes, I replied, confused. We have a warrant to search the premises. We've received a tip about potentially incriminating materials related to the recent scandal involving your wife. My heart sank. What was going on? I let them in, stunned as they began combing through the house. They confiscated Anne's laptop, her phone, and even some of the files I had stored on a hard drive. That's when it hit me, and must have tipped them off, trying to turn the tables on me. But why? It didn't take long to find out. The next morning, I received a call from my lawyer. David, we've got a problem, she said, her voice tense. Anne's legal team is claiming that you were involved in the distribution of those videos. They're accusing you of trying to frame her. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's insane! She's the one who... I know, she interrupted. But they're spinning this as a calculated revenge scheme. They're arguing that you leaked the videos to ruin her career and reputation. I was furious. And was trying to shift the blame onto me, painting herself as the victim. And with the evidence I'd collected, it wasn't hard for her to create a narrative that made me look like the villain. Over the next few days, the situation spiraled further out of control. And went public with her side of the story, giving a tearful interview to a local news station. She claimed that she had made mistakes, but accused me of orchestrating a smear campaign against her. I trusted him, she said, her voice cracking. But he betrayed me in the most unimaginable way. It was a masterclass in manipulation, and to my horror, some people believed her. I started receiving hateful messages online, calling me a monster, an abuser, a vindictive husband who had gone too far. But the worst part came when the kids got dragged into it. Sarah and Michael, who were away at college, started getting messages from friends asking about the scandal. Emily overheard whispers at school and came home crying one day, asking, "Daddy, why do people hate us?" It broke my heart. I had done everything to protect them from this mess, but now they were caught in the crossfire. I realized that if I didn't act quickly, I could lose everything: my family, my reputation, my freedom. And wasn't just fighting to save herself, she was trying to destroy me in the process. But if she thought I was going to roll over and let her win, she was wrong. I had one final move to make, and this time, I was going to ensure there was no way out for her. Anne's attempt to paint herself as the victim was cunning, but she underestimated me. I wasn't just going to sit back and let her rewrite the narrative. If she wanted a war, I was prepared to finish it. The first thing I did was hire a private investigator. I needed someone impartial to uncover the full extent of Anne's actions, someone whose findings could stand up in court. Within days, the investigator uncovered more dirt, a pattern of misconduct spanning years, involving multiple students and even colleagues. There were financial inconsistencies too, as Anne had apparently been using university funds for her secret rendezvous. Meanwhile, I reached out to Jake and Liam again. This time, I told them the truth about who I was and what Anne had done. At first, they were hesitant, but when I showed them the evidence I'd gathered, including the videos she had secretly recorded, they agreed to testify against her. Jake, in particular, was furious. "She ruined my life," he said. "It's time she pays for it." With their statements and the private investigator's findings, I had a rock-solid case. But I wasn't just focused on winning in court. I wanted to dismantle the false image Anne had created in the public eye. So, I went to the media. Using the same anonymous account I had used before, I leaked a detailed report to several local journalists. It included evidence of Anne's misconduct, the testimonies from Jake and Liam, and even screenshots of her manipulative emails. The story spread like wildfire. Overnight, the narrative shifted. Anne was no longer seen as the victim. She was exposed as a predator and a liar. The backlash was swift and brutal. The university issued a statement condemning her actions and announced that she had been officially terminated. Her friends and colleagues distanced themselves, and the few people who had defended her online went silent. Anne's carefully constructed image had been obliterated. But I wasn't done yet. I filed a countersuit against Anne, accusing her of defamation and emotional distress. My lawyer assured me that with the evidence we had, it was an open and shut case. Anne's legal team, clearly unprepared for the onslaught, tried to negotiate a settlement, but I refused. I wanted this to go to court. I wanted the world to see her for who she truly was. The trial was grueling. Anne tried to play the victim, crying on the stand and accusing me of orchestrating everything. But the evidence spoke for itself. The emails, the videos, the testimonies from Jake and Liam, it was all laid bare for the judge and jury to see. When the verdict finally came, it was exactly what I had hoped for. Anne was found guilty of multiple counts of misconduct and ordered to pay significant damages. The court also ruled in my favor regarding custody of Emily, and would only be allowed supervised visits. As I walked out of the courtroom that day, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I had won, but the cost had been high. My family had been torn apart, and the scars would take years to heal. But just when I thought it was over, something happened that turned everything upside down again. A week after the trial ended, I was finally starting to feel like I could move on. The house was quieter without, but there was a strange peace in the silence. Emily was adjusting well, and Sarah and Michael, though distant at first, had started reaching out more. For the first time in months, life felt almost normal. That's when I found the letter. It was a chilly Saturday morning, and I was cleaning out Anne's old office. Most of her belongings had been packed up or discarded, but a few papers remained scattered across the desk. As I sorted through them, a thick, sealed envelope caught my eye. My name was written on the front in Anne's handwriting. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. The tone was desperate, almost manic, and the contents made my blood run cold. "David," If you're reading this, then everything has already fallen apart. I know you think I'm a monster, but there are things you don't understand, things I've been protecting you from. I made mistakes, yes, but I wasn't the only one. There are people who know what I've done, and they've been using it against me. Jake wasn't just a student. He was sent to me. I stopped reading, my heart pounding. Sent to her? What was she talking about? The letter continued. It started 2 years ago when I was approached by someone claiming to have evidence of my relationships. They threatened to expose me unless I agreed to certain arrangements. At first, it was small things, passing students I'd never met, giving them higher grades. But then they sent Jake. They told me to keep him close, to make him happy, or they would ruin me. I didn't know what else to do. I could barely breathe. And wasn't just admitting to being blackmailed, she was implicating others. I thought I could handle it, but Jake started demanding more. He wasn't just some victim, he was working for them. I tried to cut him off, but they threatened to hurt you. To hurt the kids. That's why I couldn't tell you. I thought if I kept quiet, I could protect everyone. But now it's all falling apart, and I don't know what they'll do next. The letter ended abruptly, as if she had written it in a rush. There was no signature, just a postscript. Check the safe in the cabin. The code is 0317. Everything you need is there. I stared at the letter, my mind racing. Was this some desperate attempt to shift blame, or was there more to Anne's actions than I had realized? I had no reason to trust her, but the mention of the cabin gave me pause. If there was even a chance she was telling the truth, I needed to find out. That afternoon, I drove to the cabin. It felt surreal being there after everything that had happened, but I pushed the memories aside and focused on the task at hand. The safe Anne had mentioned was hidden behind a false panel in the closet. I entered the code, 0317, her birthday, and it clicked open. Inside, I found a stack of documents, a burner phone, and a USB drive. The documents included bank statements showing large, unaccounted-for deposits into Anne's account. There were also letters, threatening ones, demanding compliance and referencing specific students. The USB drive was the most damning. When I plugged it into my laptop, I found encrypted files and a text document with instructions on how to decrypt them. After following the steps, the files revealed a series of videos, not of Anne, but of other professors and staff at the university engaging in similar misconduct. Some of the faces I recognized, others were strangers. This wasn't just about Anne. It was part of something much larger. I sat back, staring at the screen. The pieces were starting to come together, and what I saw was far worse than I could have imagined. Anne had been caught in a web of corruption and blackmail, and now I was staring directly into the heart of it. And whoever was behind it wouldn't stop just because Anne was out of the picture. The discovery at the cabin left me shaken. Anne wasn't the innocent victim she had painted herself to be, but she also wasn't the sole mastermind of her downfall. She had been a pawn in a much larger game, and now, by uncovering the contents of that safe, I had inserted myself into it. The burner phone in the safe contained a series of messages, cryptic and chilling. Many of them were instructions to Anne, telling her who to meet, what to say, and how to act. One message in particular stood out. "You're not special. Cooperate, or we'll move on to someone else. Remember, your family is only safe as long as you play along." Who were these people? What did they want? And how far did their influence reach? The USB drive provided some answers. As I combed through the files, I found evidence of a shadowy organization operating within the university. They were exploiting professors like Anne, using blackmail to force them into manipulating grades, funneling money, and grooming certain students for unknown purposes. The videos I had uncovered weren't just about Anne. They implicated half a dozen faculty members, all of whom were now at the mercy of this organization. It was clear this wasn't just about affairs or misconduct. This was a network of power and control, and Anne had been a cog in their machine. But why had she kept the evidence? Was it a bargaining chip, or had she planned to expose them before everything fell apart? The answers didn't matter now. What mattered was that I was holding the key to dismantling their entire operation. The question was, what would they do when they realized it? That night, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, my heart pounding. "Mr. Collins," a deep voice said. "We know what you found." I didn't respond, gripping the phone tightly. "You've stumbled into something you don't understand. Destroy the files and this ends here. Refuse and you'll regret it." The line went dead before I could say a word. I sat there in silence, the weight of the situation sinking in. They were watching me. They knew what I had. And they weren't going to let me expose them without a fight. The next few days were a blur of paranoia and planning. I knew I couldn't go to the police. This organization likely had people on the inside. Instead, I reached out to a trusted friend, Mark, who worked as an investigative journalist. I didn't tell him everything, just enough to pique his interest. "This could be the story of your career," I said, sliding the USB drive across the table during our meeting. "But it's dangerous. You need to be careful." Mark agreed to look into it, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. If anyone could expose this web of corruption, it was him. But my relief was short-lived. 2 nights later, my house was broken into. I woke to the sound of shattering glass and heavy footsteps downstairs. Grabbing the baseball bat I kept by my bed, I crept down the hallway, my heart racing. When I reached the living room, I found the place ransacked. Drawers were pulled out, papers scattered everywhere. Whoever had been here was looking for something. The files. The USB drive. They didn't know I had already handed it off to Mark, but that didn't mean they wouldn't come back. As I stood there, the phone rang. Another unknown number. "Consider this a warning," the voice said. "You've involved the wrong people, Mr. Collins. Stop now, or your family pays the price." The line went dead again. I sank onto the couch, my mind racing. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about survival. I had uncovered something far bigger than Anne's betrayal, and now I was in the crosshairs of people who wouldn't hesitate to destroy me to protect their secrets. But I wasn't backing down. Not after everything they had done to my family. If they thought they could scare me into silence, they were wrong. It was time to fight back. The break-in and threatening calls made one thing clear: I was in danger, and so was my family. I moved Emily to stay with Sarah and Michael under the guise of a long sibling weekend. They didn't question it, likely sensing the tension in my voice. With my children safe, I had one less thing to worry about. But I couldn't let fear dictate my actions. The people behind this shadow organization thrived on intimidation and control. If I wanted to take them down, I needed to hit them where it hurt, and fast. Mark, the journalist I'd entrusted with the USB drive, called me 2 days after the break-in. His voice was laced with urgency. "David, this is bigger than I thought. The names on these files? They're not just faculty. There are politicians, donors, even law enforcement connected to this. I've already had 2 sources back out because they're scared." I gripped the phone. "So what do we do?" "We go public," Mark said. "But we have to do it in a way they can't suppress. I've contacted a few trusted colleagues at major outlets. If we release everything at once, they won't have time to shut it down." The plan was risky, but it was our best shot. I knew they'd come after me again, but this time, I was prepared. Before Mark went forward with the story, I planted my own bait. Using the burner phone from the safe, I sent an anonymous message to one of the numbers in the threatening texts. "I have the files. Meet me if you want them back." I arranged a meeting at a secluded location, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Mark's team would be nearby, equipped with cameras and microphones to capture everything. If someone showed up, we'd have evidence of their involvement. That night, as I waited in the dimly lit warehouse, my nerves were on edge. Minutes felt like hours. I clutched the baseball bat I had brought with me, my heart pounding with every creak of the building. Then I heard it, the sound of a car pulling up. A man stepped out, his face obscured by a hat and scarf. He approached cautiously, his eyes scanning the area. "Do you have it?" he asked, his voice cold and demanding. Depends, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Who are you? He smirked, pulling out a gun. The last person you'll see if you're lying. Before I could respond, the warehouse was flooded with light. Mark's team had sprung into action, cameras rolling as they captured the man's face. He cursed and tried to run, but police officers, ones Mark had vetted for their integrity, emerged from the shadows and tackled him to the ground. I stared, stunned, as they arrested him. Mark approached me, a triumphant grin on his face. Got him, he said. And guess what? He's not just a thug. He's the dean of Ann's University. The next morning, the story broke. Major news outlets ran with the headline: University scandal unveiled, blackmail, corruption, and abuse of power exposed. The files from the USB drive were released to the public, sparking outrage. The names implicated included prominent figures in academia, politics, and law enforcement. The dean, now in custody, had no choice but to cooperate. His confession unraveled the entire operation, revealing years of blackmail, embezzlement, and manipulation. Ann's name was mentioned, but as a victim coerced into compliance. While it didn't absolve her of her actions, it painted a fuller picture of the nightmare she had been living. Anne reached out to me after the story broke. She wanted to talk, to explain herself, but I couldn't face her. I wasn't ready to forgive her, and I wasn't sure I ever would be. It's been 6 months since the story went public. The shadow organization has been dismantled, its leaders arrested or disgraced. The university is under new leadership, and the victims, including Jake and Liam, have received public apologies and support. As for me, life is far from perfect, but it's getting better. I've focused on rebuilding my relationship with my kids, ensuring they feel safe and loved. Emily still asks about her mother, and I do my best to answer without bitterness. Anne? She moved out of state and is trying to start over. I wish her no ill will, but I also can't forget what she did. Trust, once shattered, is nearly impossible to rebuild. People ask if I regret any of it, exposing and taking on the organization, risking everything. My answer is always the same. No. The truth matters, even when it's painful. And sometimes, the only way to find peace is to burn everything down and start again. If you want more stories like this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.